Thank you so much, Bob. It's a great honor to be back here at the White Horse. This is one of the birthplaces of AmiciMusic. I'm Dan Weiser, the founder and artistic director. We started performing in the Asheville, Black Mountain area about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, right after the White Horse opened. And this was one of the first places that I found a piano, and I said, this is where we need to play. And Bob and Kim and Don and everybody here have been so welcoming to AmiciMusic. So I'm glad to be able to be back here and to work with Rad House Studios and everything they're doing to keep music live here in the Asheville area, which has always been AmiciMusic's home. And even though I've moved out of Baltimore, I try to come back here as often as I can. And hopefully now that White Horse is doing all of these kind of wonderful live programs, I'll be able to get back here and do more. Tonight, it's a great, fun program we're going to do. This is part 2, actually, of A Woman's Voice. If you did not see part 1, which I did last weekend from my house in Baltimore, check out the AmiciMusic.org website and look on the video link. You can catch up on some of the works that I did last week. Those were mostly Austrian and German women from the late 1700s, early 1800s. And today, we're going to be in France and then move to America from the mid-19th century into the 20th century. And in the middle of it all, I'm really happy to be able to have my twin daughters, wonderful, beautiful twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, make their professional singing debut here. And I want to thank a shout out to Carol Westcott, who hopefully is listening. I know she's at dinner somewhere in Baltimore, but thank you, Carol, for all the work you've done with their voices. And it's going to be a lot of fun to hear a little Broadway. We want to hear the women's voices coming out of them. And that'll be about halfway through after the Cecile Chaminade piece. Last week, I had to give out a few terrible quotes by men about the horrors, about how they felt women were, including Aristotle, who thought a woman was an unfinished man, closer to a barbarian. I think I read this last week, but I'll read it again because it's so horrible. Hans von Bülow, a very famous conductor, friends with Wagner, he said the following: "Reproductive genius can be admitted to the pretty sex, but productive genius unconditionally cannot. There will never be a woman composer. At best, a misprinting copyist. I do not believe in the feminine form of the word creator." And then the famous French writer Guy de Maupassant, several years later, said, "The experience of centuries has proved that woman is, without exception, incapable of any true artistic or scientific work. The attempt is useless, since we have not yet produced the female artist or musician, notwithstanding all the desperate efforts of daughters of concierges and of all the marriageable young ladies in general who study piano and even composition. Women on earth has 2 parts to play, quite distinct roles, both of them charming: love and maternity." Bah. All right, so that's what we have to deal with, and that's what all these women had to deal with in trying to get their voices heard. Some had more success than others. Some had pretty good success in their lifetime, but have then been forgotten. And that, again, has to do with the institution of the whole music system, in which certain composers get remembered, and especially in the beginning part of the 20th century, when a certain style of very modern music was in vogue. And if you wrote sort of tuneful music, like a lot of these women did, you were considered old-fashioned and sort of secondary. And that's why a lot of this music has been lost. We need to really bring it back. And so I'm going to begin with a work by a French composer. Louise Farrenc is her name. She was born in 1804 and dies in 1875. Born Jean-Louis Dumont, her father was a pretty well-known sculptor in Paris. And she was able, actually, to study with Johann Hummel and Ignaz Moscheles. She was one of the rare women who were able to get some composition lessons. And even Anton Reicha, who was a good friend of Beethoven, taught her, probably not in a conservatory class, as women were not able to do that, but because her father had some money and some connections, he was able to get her private lessons. She meets Aristide Farrenc while she's attending the Paris Conservatory as a pianist. She was a phenomenal pianist. Marries him. He's several years older than her. She marries him when she is 17. They embark on a successful career as pianist and flutist, touring all through Europe in the 1820s and 1830s. And then he sort of gave up playing, and became the publisher, one of the leading publishers in France, with the Édition Farrenc. And she helped in that publication, in fact, develop find some old music for pianists to play. In 1842, she was actually appointed as a professor of piano at the Paris Conservatory, the first woman to be given that honor. It was found out many years later that she was paid about half what all the men were being paid, but she at least got that honor and eventually was able to get more and more money. But unfortunately for Farrenc, she wrote some early piano pieces, including one I will play, and then she began to specialize in chamber music and symphonies. And in France at that time, there was no market for that kind of music. You had to be writing either an opera or a ballet, and she wasn't interested in doing either of those. And so she could not really find a way to get her music performed. And this was not true just for women, but even the French composers in those years who tried to write symphonies and chamber music were despairing about it. Here's Camille Saint-Saëns talking about it. He said, "The composer at this time who was bold enough to venture out into the field of instrumental music had only one form for the performance of his works, a concert which he had to organize himself and to which he invited his friends and the press. One could not even think of attracting the general public. The very mention of the name of a French composer on a placard, especially that of a living French composer, was enough to send everyone running." But she still plugged away, wrote all these wonderful pieces. Her Nanette was pretty well known in her lifetime, but then after she died, the biographer Joseph Féty wrote the following: "Unfortunately, the genre of large-scale instrumental music to which Madame Farrenc, by nature and formation, felt herself called, involves performance resources which a composer can acquire for herself or himself only with enormous effort. Another factor here is the public, as a rule, not a very knowledgeable one, whose only standard for measuring the quality of a work is the name of its author. If the composer is unknown, the audience remains unreceptive, and the publishers, especially in France, close their ears anyways when someone offers them a halfway decent work. Such were the obstacles that Madame Farrenc met along the way and which caused her to despair. This is the reason why her oeuvre has fallen into oblivion today, when at any other epoch her works would have brought her great esteem." And so what I want to play now is an early work she wrote in 1834. This is called the Souvenir des Huguenots. And this means the remembrance of the opera Huguenots. Les Huguenots was a huge hit in Paris, one of these grand operas by Meyerbeer that came out around this time, telling the story of the slaughter of the Huguenots at the hand of the Catholics back in the 17th century. And Meyerbeer used in that score the great hymn Ein Festeberg, the mighty fortress, written by Bach with words by Martin Luther. So you'll hear that in the middle that she takes as the theme and variation. So here's this wonderful Souvenir des Huguenots by Louise Farrenc. That's some virtuosic work by Louise Farrenc, sadly a composer who we don't play a lot of, but there are several trios that she wrote that are fabulous. Wrote 3 symphonies as well, so look her up and explore the music of Louise Farrenc. We move now to a shorter salon kind of piece by a fascinating composer who really needs a movie made about her life story. Her name is Melanie Bonis, born in 1858 and dies in 1937. She was born into a kind of a modest, lower middle-class family in Paris, was very strong-willed, taught herself the piano. It was a very religious family, and they didn't really want her getting involved in music. But it turns out that there was a family friend, Cecile Farrenc, a well-known composer, who heard her playing when she was 16 years old. And he told the parents, you must get this woman to the conservatory and taking lessons in piano and in composition. And she, in fact, was in some classes with Claude Debussy there at the conservatory, one of the first women to be able to take composition classes at the time. She used the pseudonym Mel Bonis so that she could publish some music at the time with a man's name. And unfortunately for her, while she was there, she met a man, a singer. Amédée Hettich was his name. He was also a journalist and a music critic, and already had some pretty good influence, even though he was only 22 years old. And she set some of his poems to music, and of course they fell madly in love, and the parents decided that was not a good idea. So they forced the daughter to leave the conservatoire, much to the chagrin of Farrenc, because at the time she was having first prize in harmony in her class, beating out Claude Debussy. But she is taken out of the conservatory and within a year or two set up in a marriage with a man named Albert Domange, who was 25 years older than she was, widowed with 5 sons already. And she ended up becoming what was known as Madame Domange. She lived this perfectly wonderful bourgeois life, very wealthy. They had a home on the Rue de Monceau in the fancy districts in Paris, as well as a house out in Étretat in Normandy. And she bore him 3 more sons, so there were 8 boys altogether. But at some point, she began to have desires to begin composing again. She secretly started to compose, and then, worse than that, she secretly started to meet up with, guess who? Amédée Hettich, who had married by the time, but they had a little fling. And at some point, while she was supposedly in the healthy waters of Switzerland, they had a fling that they produced a child. Not one they could tell either of their spouses about. So this young girl, whose name was Melanie, was brought up by one of the chambermaids and was not told anything about who her mother and father was, although later on, Hettich divorced his wife and got back and sort of started protecting this daughter. She, meanwhile, begins to compose more and writes over 300 works, and filled with this passion and soul that seemed opposite from her bourgeois life that she was leading. She became an important member of the Société des Compositeurs de Musique, one of the first French musical societies, and in fact, her music was most performed on those early concerts. So she was active in this new French musical society. But in the beginning of World War I, the mother of the person who had taken over motherhood of Melanie dies, and poor Melanie is an orphan. By this time, the father, Albert, her husband, Bonis' husband, has died, and so Bonis takes in her young daughter, Adaline, and just says that she's her aunt or some distant relative. Unfortunately, one of her sons, Bonis' sons, falls madly in love with his half-sister, not knowing it's his half-sister. And in order to stop the love, she has to then tell her that she is actually her mother, which breaks everybody's heart. They have to keep it secret, and it never gets let out during Bonis' life. So somebody go make a movie of that, and I'm going to play this romance, a romance without words, Romance sans Paroles, by the fascinating Melanie Bonis. That's Melanie Bonis, who led that sort of double life. There's a couple of wonderful pieces, including a cello and piano sonata that I've done, a much longer 30-minute piece filled with some really innovative harmonies. One of the fascinating things about these women composers is because they almost had to learn on their own because it was so difficult to get training, they didn't get stuck with some of the rules that tend to kind of push music into a box. And so there were lots of openings for harmonic ideas, and Bonis found some of those really innovative early harmonies. I urge you to go listen to some of her music. All right, now the next composer actually had some pretty great success in her life. Cecile Chaminade wrote over 400 works and was actually able to publish all 400 of the works, which was kind of a rarity at the time. She was born in 1857, would die in 1944. The British Queen Victoria was a huge fan of her works. She grew up in, again, a household where the father was not very interested in having his daughter get into music. He once said, "Bourgeois girls are predestined to become wives and mothers." He was a big insurance salesman at the time. Like our first composer, Farrenc, Chaminade had a friend, Bonis, Chaminade had a friend, Georges Bizet, the composer, who heard Chaminade play and called her "my little Mozart," and urged them to get her some training, at least on the piano. When she was 20 years old, the father took a long trip, and she decided that would be her time to make her public debut at the Salle Pleyel, which was a huge success. Then she wrote a trio that was well received, and even an opera, La Civiliane, which showed the influence of Carmen in it by Bizet. And her father dies in 1887, and then she began to make some money off of her music. Some people call her music more salon music, which is, again, a coded language of women's music. But the idea is that it's so well crafted, it just happens to have some pretty good tunes in it, and has not really pushed the modern boundary all that much. But she was just clearly a great craftsman as a composer. She once said, "Women have not been considered a working force in the world, and the work that their sex and conditions impose upon them has not been so adjusted as to give them a little fuller scope for the development of their best self. They have been handicapped, and only few, through force of circumstances or inherent strength, have been able to get the better of that handicap." She ended up becoming very popular in America in the first decade of the 20th century. In fact, by 1905, there were actually over 200 Chaminade clubs all along the East Coast, mostly in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And they actually had used her name with an acronym. C stood for Concentrated Concerted Effort. H for Harmony of Spirit and Work. A for Artistic Ideals. M for Musical Merit Maintained. I for Inspiration. N for notes, every kind except the promissory ones. A for ardor and aspiration. D for devotion to duty. And E for earnest endeavor. These were mostly clubs for amateur women to get together and have a chance to perform their music together. She also did a Carnegie Hall concert in 1908, which at that point raised a record of $5,000, which was a huge amount of money at the time. And in 1913, she became the first French woman composer inducted into the Legion of Honor. One last quote, Ambroise Thomas, a wonderful composer at the time, wrote about her. He said, "This is not a woman who composes, but a composer who happens to be a woman." So I'm gonna play a piece of hers, another romance sans paroles, a song without words. There are actually 6 movements altogether. I'm gonna play 4 of them, which gives you a sense of the beauty of her style. The last one is the lovely Meditation, the last piece of that set by Cecile, Chaminade. All right, I thought we would take a little bit of a break here from solo piano music and allow my twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, who many of those who grew up in the Whitehorse area have seen grow up since they were young girls, and they both have loved to sing since they were kids. They both played piano. They were really good when they were 5 and 6, and then they quit on me when they were 8, but that's my fault. But it's good that they're singing now, and again, thank you to Carol Westcott in Baltimore for the lessons. So we're going to do one each of a solo, and then we're going to do a duet. I want to bring out Sophie first, and she's going to sing a song from the show Mean Girls, Stupid. What's it called? Stupid with Love? That's what it's called. Early on, as the girl has moved from Africa, where her family was doing good things, and is now in this crazy new American school, and has been very good at math, but now has fallen in love. So please welcome my daughter, Sophie Weiser.
I was 5, I fell in love, it didn't last. He ran from me, literally ran from me, and being Kenyan, he ran fast. When I was 10, in love again, this Peace Corps guy. I waited hours inside his tent with flowers, which made him laugh, which made me cry. By 13, I gave up trying. I decided I would be a mathematician, 'cause math is real. I memorized a lot of pi because addition and subtraction and division would never make me feel so stupid with love. Like I didn't get it, I didn't get it somehow. Smart with math, but stupid with love. I didn't get it till now. So thank you, math, for being there to bring me joy. And thank you, math, 'cause now you brought me this cute boy. He's like someone from TV, he's like that guy who gives out roses to those women. His clothes, his grooming, and he's a foot away from me with swoopy hair and shiny eyes that I could swim in. He's alive and in the room, and I'm stupid with love. I want to get it, but how? Smart with math, but stupid with love. I didn't get it till now. I'm astounded and nonplussed, I'm filled with calculus. Does Sky work out? He must all sweaty at the gym. Could that image be more hot? Let me just enjoy that thought. School was rough, but now it's not. 'Cause now there's him. It's all so simple. Stupid with love, but I can get it. Watch this girl self-educate. I learned math so I can learn love. Wanna bet it? Just wait. Just wait. Just wait.
Thank you, Sophie. And now I'm going to bring out Emma, her twin, her older twin by 1 minute, and she is going to sing a wonderful song from the film Princess and Frog, music by Randy Newman, and the song Almost There, it's called. A wonderful, wonderful jazzy piece. Please welcome my other daughter, Emma Weiser.
Mama, I don't have time for dancing. That's just gonna have to wait a while. Ain't got time for messing around. And got my style. This old town can slow you down, people taking the easy way. But I know exactly where I'm going. I'm getting closer and closer every day, and I'm almost there. I'm almost there. People down here think I'm crazy, but I don't care. Trials and tribulations, I've had my share. There ain't nothing gonna stop me now, 'cause I'm almost there. I remember Daddy told me fairy tales can't come true, but you gotta make 'em happen. It all depends on you. So I'll work real hard each and every day. Now things for sure are going my way. Just doing what I do. Look out, boys, I'm coming through, and I'm almost there. I'm almost there. People gonna come here from everywhere, and I'm almost there. I'm almost there. There's been trials and tribulations. I know I've had my share, but I've climbed a mountain and I've crossed a river, and I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm almost
Woo! Thank you, Emma. All right, and we got one more song we're going to do, bring out Sophie. We have seen the show Wicked a couple times, and in fact, in their school, they just did the Wizard of Oz, and Sophie was a fantastic lion, and Emma was a fantastic Glinda, so we're going to do this beautiful duet, For Good, from the end of the show, when Elphaba and Glinda realize they've really gone through a lot together.
I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
It well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is made from what I learned from you. You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being my friend. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind off the sea, because I knew you.
Because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done you blame me for.
But then I guess we know there's blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore. Like a carpet as it passes the sun,
Wind up the sea.
that beats a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? I do believe I have been changed for the better. And because I knew you,
Because I knew you.
because I knew you, I have been changed for good.
Thank you, guys. Yay! Those are my daughters. So I thought I just wanted to give their women's voices a chance to come out, and just wonderful to see the music pouring out of them. All right, so we're going to come over to America now to finish up with 4 different composers, starting off with the wonderful Amy Beach, born Amy Chaney in Henniker, New Hampshire, in 1867. She also had a family friend, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who happened to visit her when she was 8 years old, and again told the parents, this kid is immensely talented, you got to get her out of New Hampshire. They actually went down to Boston. They thought about moving to Europe, but they decided to go to Boston instead. According to her mother, she was able to sing at the age of 1, 40 songs in perfect tune when she was 1 year old. By the time she was 2, she could add counter melodies to all of those songs. She read music starting at the age of 3 and wrote her first waltzes for the piano when she was 4 years old. So truly a great prodigy. Was also a phenomenal pianist, and in fact, made her debut with the Boston Symphony when she was only 16 years old, playing some Chopin. She, at the rehearsal, apparently, of one of the the Mendelssohn Concerto a year later, the conductor apparently decided to go easy on the teenage soloist and slow down a little bit. And according to Amy, I did not know that he was sparing me, but I did know that the tempo was dragging badly, so I had to swing the orchestra back into time. So this was a confident young woman. Unfortunately, as happened very often, she got married with a year later, at the age of 19, to a man about 20 years older than her, Dr. Henry Harris Aubrey Beach, a well-known doctor at the Mass General Hospital. In fact, I think he was the doctor that introduced ether into America. And he did not mind his wife composing music, but he did not want her teaching music. He thought that was beneath their station as a sort of wealthy couple there living on Commonwealth Avenue. And he only said he only allowed her to play 2 concerts a year that had to be donation concerts. He didn't want her making money off of that. So that's terrible for her performance side, but it was good for her composition side because it really made her have to compose. She was not able to get real lessons, but what she did was study the scores of Brahms and Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and just understand music that way. And she writes her first Mass in E-flat major in 1892, the first piece performed by the Handel and Haydn Society Orchestra by a woman. Never before in their many years, they were founded in 1815, had they ever performed the music by any woman, well, American or not. And then a few years later, in 1896, she wrote her Gaelic Symphony, which if you ever can listen to online is a phenomenal piece of music. It was the first symphony composed and published by an American woman. George Whitefield Chadwick, who was then the head of New England Conservatory, wrote her a letter after seeing this symphony. He said, "I always feel a thrill of pride myself whenever I hear a fine work written by any of us, and as such, you will now have to be counted, whether you like it or not, as one of the boys. I don't think she needed to be counted it, but there were a group in Boston, Arthur Foote and Edward McDowell and John Knowles Payne, who were writing similar kind of music, but hers was definitely the best. She just was innovative and interesting in what she did. When her music finally came to Germany in the early part of the century, a Hamburg critic there said, "We have before us undeniably a possessor of musical gifts of the highest kind, a musical nature touched with genius. She is the first American woman able to compose music of a European quality of excellence." She spent many years at the McDowell Colony in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and there were also clubs started in her honor. They were called beach clubs, which were fun, which were there for women and to help educate young girls in music, and she became the first president of the Society of American Women Composers. She also wrote an opera, Cabildo, which finally was performed at the Metropolitan Opera, I think a few years back. It took many years beyond it. And she did, actually, in the year 2009, the Boston Pops paid tribute by making her the first woman to join 86 other composers on the granite wall of Boston's famous Hatch Shell at the Esplanade there. And in honor of her 150th birthday on September 5th, 2017, the mayor of the city of Boston declared that day Amy Beach Day. So maybe she's going to make a comeback. This is one of her very slow, beautiful pieces called Dreaming. There's the lovely Mrs. H.H.A. Beach, as she actually published most of her music, but Amy Beach, we call her one of our great American composers. The next composer is, again, a woman who has completely been forgotten, but she was one of several women ragtime composers. The wonderful ragtime music, led by Scott Joplin, had really taken the world by storm in that first decade of the 20th century. Was one of the great first American exports. All around the world, everyone's playing that syncopated beat, although there were many people frightened by that music, just as they were frightened by rock and roll and by rap music. They thought it was the end of civilization. Here's an article from 1912 in Musical America. The counters of our music stores are now loaded with this virulent poison, which in the form of a malarious epidemic is finding its way into the homes and brains of our youth to such an extent as to arouse one's suspicions of their sanity. The country is awakening to the real harm this ragtime is doing. It is an evil music that has crept into the hearts of our American people, regardless of race, and must be wiped out as other bad and dangerous epidemics have been exterminated. A person once inoculated with the ragtime fever is like one addicted to strong drink. Ragtime is syncopation gone mad, and its victims, in my opinion, can only be treated successfully like a dog with rabies. And that was not an uncommon feeling. And a lot of it came from the fact that this music came out of the brothels and saloons of African-American society down in Mississippi, but it made its way into the cities, into white America, and especially in the Midwest, where there was a group of women led by Adaline Shepard, May Aufderheder, Julie Niebergall, and they began to write in the first decade many pieces, many of them lost, but Adaline Shepard wrote one of the first big hits called Pickles and Pepper in 1906, and I want to play that piece. It was the most popular rag written by a woman. It sold 2 million copies in 1908 and was so popular that the middle theme became the official theme song for Williams Jennings Bryan election run that year. It sounds like a good old theme song for a presidential campaign. And there's a great story about this piece. She had, again, grown up sort of teaching herself how to play music, did not know how to read music or write music, but she had it in her head. And this is according to a piece in the Evening Wisconsin of September 1908. Pickles and Peppers originated with Miss Adaline Shepard, a young woman living on the west side of Milwaukee. The peculiar thing about the composition of the piece is that the author does not know a note of music, and yet is an accomplished pianist, playing entirely by ear. She did not write down the music. One day in the summer of 1907, Miss Shepard told Joseph Flanner that she had a composition on which she desired his opinion. When that music publisher asked to see her notes, the young woman replied she had none, that the music was just in her head. Thereupon he asked Miss Shepard to play it for him. This she did, and Mr. Flanner admits now that during the first 2 or 3 bars, his mind was not concentrated on the girl playing beside him. In a moment, however, Mr. Flanner's trained musical ear began to assume closer attention. When the girl had finished, the publisher said nothing in praise or dispraise, further than to ask her to call again the next day at the same hour. Mr. Flanner then requested a bandmaster to meet the girl, and after she had played the piece to the 2 gentlemen, the bandmaster declared his willingness to transcribe the music for it, although, like all orchestra leaders, he expressed his abhorrence for all rag music. Not long thereafter, the instrumental music was placed on the market and became an instant hit. She wrote a couple more songs, the Wireless Rag, the Live Wire Rag, and the Victory March. But after that, she sort of falls by the wayside. We know she got married in 1910 and had several kids and seemingly stopped composing. But I think you'll enjoy this little piece, Pickles and Peppers by Adaline Shepard. Words by Adaline Shepherd. All right, got two more pieces to play, and both of these are by two remarkable African-American women who, of course, had to not only deal with the misogyny in the music world as a woman, but also the racism. And they actually did get their pieces heard in their lifetime. But sadly have again been neglected, I think largely because their music, again, uses the spiritual tradition, this folk music of the African Americans, of the slaves, the music that helped them get through the slavery, and often was coded language to get into under the Underground Railroad. Music like Wade in the Water were often sung as ways to tell slaves it's time to escape. This music actually has obviously deep meaning, and it was used by both Florence Price and Margaret Bonds in a lot of their music. And because of that, I think the music world sort of said, oh, it's lesser music, it's folk music. But it's kind of shocking, because this is what Dvorak, the great Czech composer, who's loved for his folk music in Czechoslovakia, he came to America in the late 1800s, and he foresaw that this was the music that America should use if they wanted to become a great country, that he saw too many American composers writing really bad European-style music, and he told our American composers, go out and listen to the music here, the Native American music, the Appalachian music, the African-American music. He said, the inspiration for a truly American national music might be derived from the Negre melodies or Indian chants. I was led to take this view partly by the fact that the so-called plantation songs are the most striking and appealing melodies that have yet been found on this side of the water. The most potent, as well as the most beautiful among them, are those spirituals, all of which are distinguished by unusual and subtle harmonies, the likes of which I have found in no other songs but those of old Scotland and Ireland. And the great W.E.B. Du Bois talked about this in his book, The Souls of Black Folk, in 1903. He said the following, little of beauty has America given the world save the rude grandeur that God himself stamped on her bosom. The human spirit in this new world has expressed itself in vigor and ingenuity rather than in beauty. And so by fateful chance, the Negro folk song, the rhythmic cry of the slave, stands today not simply as the sole American music, but as the most beautiful expression of human experience born this side of the seas. It has been neglected, it has been and is half despised, and above all, it has been persistently mistaken and misunderstood. But notwithstanding, it still remains as the singular spiritual heritage of our nation and the greatest gift of the Negro people. Through all the sorrow of the spirituals, there breathes a hope, a faith in the ultimate justice of things. The minor cadences of despair change often to triumph and calm confidence. Sometimes it is faith in life, sometimes a faith in death. Sometimes assurance of boundless justice in some fair world beyond. But whichever it is, the meaning is always clear, that sometime, somewhere, men will judge men by their souls and not by their skins. Is such a hope truly justified? Beautiful words of W.E.B. Du Bois, which are so potent even today. So I'm going to start off with Florence Price, who was a remarkable young composer. Again, one of these amazing child prodigies, born in 1887. Dies in 1953. She was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she became the first African woman recognized for a symphony, and the first to have a piece played by a major orchestra, the Chicago Orchestra. Her father was the only black dentist in Little Rock. Her mother was white of Mexican origin, and she started playing when she was 4 years old, and she had her first composition published when she was 11. She graduated her high school at the age of 14 as the valedictorian of the high school and was enrolled at the New England Conservatory of Music with a major in piano and in organ. She initially actually pretended to be Mexican. She was lighter-skinned to avoid the stigma of African Americans at the time in the early part of the 20th century. She was able to study with George Chadwick, the same guy who admired Amy Beach's music. She moves back to Atlanta in 1910 and became the head of Clark University's music department there. She marries an attorney there, Thomas Price. They moved back to Little Rock, but a series of incidents there, including several lynchings, caused them to move in 1927 to Chicago. She ultimately gets divorced while she's in Chicago, is the single mother of 2 daughters, and meets a woman, Margaret Bonds, who is the last composer I'm going to play, who was 20 years younger than her, but a very influential composer as well. She became Bonds' teacher, and they really worked off of each other quite well. Through Bonds, she met Langston Hughes and Marian Anderson. Bonds' family was well connected in Chicago. And they both submitted compositions to the Wanamaker Foundation Award in 1932. Price won first place with her symphony in E minor, which I urge you to listen to on YouTube. She wrote 4 symphonies. They're all great, but that symphony in E minor, spectacular. And also piano sonata. And then the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in 1933 played that piece, making her the first African-American woman to have one of her pieces performed. She ultimately wrote 3 piano concertos, 4 symphonies. She also sold popular songs under the pseudonym VJ. Still many of her works have not been heard, over 300 works she wrote. I'm going to play one called Fantasie Negre, written in 1929, dedicated to Margaret Bonds. She uses the spiritual Sinner, Please Don't Let This Harvest Pass as the basis for this incredibly powerful piece of music, which uses both the spiritual tradition and the Western art music tradition. This actually was choreographed a couple of years later by a dance troupe led by the Russian ballet person Ludmila Speranza, and the choreographer Catherine Dunham did the choreography for this. So here's Fantasie Negre by Florence Price. the wonderful Fantasie Negre by Florence Price. I think at the end you could hear the railroad, the churning, a train in that, the train to freedom. Just an incredible work. All right, I got one last piece, and then I hope you'll join me tomorrow night. I'm doing a bunch of dead white guys called Bach to Beethoven, but some great stories I hope as well, the music of Bach and Haydn and Mozart, and we'll finish with the Pathétique and Moonlight Sonatas by Beethoven, this being his 250th birthday, so we got to honor and celebrate that great composer. But tonight, it's all about the girls and all about the women and the incredible work that they wrote and performed by my daughters. So I wanted to finish with another powerful work by an African woman. This is Margaret Bonds, who was, again, friends with Florence Price and connected to Langston Hughes, born in Chicago, and born in 1913, would die in 1972. She actually wrote her first piece, The Market Street Blues, at the age of 5. So again, an incredible talent. Started studying with Florence Price soon afterwards. Became one of the first black students at Northwestern University. And talked about how difficult it was at Northwestern. She said, I was in this prejudiced university, this terribly prejudiced place, and I was looking in the basement of the Evanston Public Library where they had this poetry, and I came in contact with that wonderful poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, by Langston Hughes, and I know it helped my feelings of security, because in that poem, Langston Hughes tells how great the black man is, and if I had any misgivings, which I would have to have, here you are in a setup where the restaurants won't even serve you, and you're going to college, you're sacrificing, trying to get through school. And I know that poem helped save me. And she would write one of her great works based on that piece, that work. She, again, would become the woman who performed Florence Price's piano concerto with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, being the first black woman to perform with a major orchestra. She then moves to New York City in 1939, where she studies for a while at Juilliard School. She actually thought about studying with Nadia Boulanger, the great pedagogue in Paris. But Boulanger said, you are too good. You have a great style. You don't need help. She formed the Margaret Bonds Chamber Society, a group of black musicians performing mostly black classical composers, lived in Harlem for a while before finally moving out to Los Angeles. She has a great quote from 1964. She said, "Women are expected to be wives, mothers, and do all the nasty things in the community. Oh, I do them too. And if a woman is cursed with having talent too, then she just keeps apologizing for it. It really is a curse, in a way, because instead of working 12 hours a day like other women, you end up working 24. So here's the great Troubled Water. Comes from a suite, the spiritual suite that she wrote in 1967, again, based upon that wonderful spiritual Wade in the Water. Thank you all for being a part of A Woman's Voice Part 2, this wonderful live stream here at the White Horse. And I hope you can join me tomorrow evening at 7:30 for Bach to Beethoven. Thanks again to Bob Hinkle here at the White Horse, to Rad House for their recording. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Weiser. That was fantastic. I've got to say, some of the music of some of those women composers I had not heard before, and it was wonderful. I loved it. But let's get back to basics. When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountain. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Dr. Weiser, he was the vessel here this time. I hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe had a glass of wine. I hope that you were able to let go of yourself. I hope that we have helped you take your joy down from the shelf. When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. 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 Now, I've got one more piece of business to take care of. As you know, or anybody who's watched these before knows, White Horse Live's Between the Cushions worldwide contest is entering its third month. We want to know what treasures you can find between the cushions of your couch, since many of you have been sitting there the whole 3 months. Anyhow, have a look and find the most interesting thing. Drop us a line and tell us what you came up with. You can find us at Between the Cushions, White Horse, Black Mountain, P.O. Box 456, Black Mountain, North Carolina 28711. A winner will be announced on White Horse Live every week, and a grand prize will be announced after a while, soon as we figure out what it is and how we're going to pay for it. So let us hear from you, and let us hear from your couch. This week's winner is that very strict disciplinarian orchestra conductor, Leonard Prickstein. Leonard found a copy of the rarely performed opera, Trump Cavorts. Subtitle is March of the Sugar Plum Nazis. Apparently, after listening, some people have had a sudden urge to invade Poland around Christmas time. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you tomorrow, Sunday the 26th at 7:30, when AmiciMusic will feature Dr. Weiser. Again, Bach to Beethoven, great piano solos. Stay well, stay safe, stay happy, and remember, if you haven't showered in weeks, social distancing can keep you in the game. Good night now.
Thank you for joining us for White Horse Live with tonight's musical guest, Dr. Daniel Weiser. This program is produced by White Horse Black Mountain and by Rad House Studio. Bob Hinkle is your host and executive producer. Rebecca Hillgraves is director, producer, and camera operator. Claire Hoke is audio engineer. Jessica Wharton is director of photography and roving camera operator. Michael Stevens is network engineer. Jessica Fox is key grip. Public relations services provided by Maggie Rainwater at Hoosier Devil. Join us tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m., not 8 o'clock, 7:30, when Dr. Weiser returns for another edition of White Horse Live. In the meantime, be good to each other, and that includes all people.